Thank you for tuning in to the Shikama Live Show with your host, Shikama, produced by Boundless Enterprise, LLC, in association with www.lasvegasnevadadui.com. Today, Detroit files for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. The city of Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy protection in federal court Thursday, laying the groundwork for a historic effort to bail out a city that is sinking under billions of dollars in debt and decades of mismanagement, population flight, and loss of tax revenue. The bankruptcy filing makes Detroit the largest city in the United States history to do so. The filing began a 30 to 90 day period that will determine whether the city is eligible for Chapter 9 protection and define how many claims might compete for the limited settlement resources that Detroit has to offer. The bankruptcy petition would seek protection from creditors and unions who are renegotiating $18.5 billion in debt and other liabilities. It was a long time coming, says Detroit Free Press columnist Rochelle Riley. Some may think the decline in the auto industry is to blame for Detroit's bankruptcy, but Riley and Mark Minnell, author of The Last Days of Detroit, tells MSNBC Alex Witt differently. Population decline is mostly the reason to how Detroit got to this point. The more people moved to the suburbs, the fewer people left to handle a tax burden that did not change. Riley said, Michigan governor is quoted as saying, the fiscal realities confronting Detroit have been ignored for too long. I'm making this tough decision so the people of Detroit will have the basic services they deserve, and so we can start to put Detroit on a solid financial footing that will allow it to grow and prosper in the future. That's Governor Rick Snyder. This is a difficult step, but the only viable option to address a problem that has been 6 decades in the making. Detroit Emergency Manager Kevyn Orr, who in June released a plan to restructure the city's debt and obligations that would leave many creditors with much less than they are owed, has warned consistently that if negotiation hit an impasse, he would move quickly to seek bankruptcy protection. Orr's spokesman Bill Noling said, pension boards, insurers, it's clear that if you're suing us, your response is no. We still have other creditors we continue to have meetings with, other stakeholders who are trying to find a solution here, because they recognize that at the end of the day, we have to have a city that can provide basic services for 700,000 residents. My statistics are the city is at a population of 600,000. It's might be swallowed equivalent about, but I'm going to make a point in a second here about this. This week's the city's 2 pension funds, which have claims to $9.2 billion in unfunded pension and retiree healthcare liabilities, filed suit in state court to prevent Orr from slashing retiree benefits as part of a bankruptcy restructuring. A deal with creditors gives the city access to $11 million a month in casino tax revenue that Orr said is key to maintaining city services while negotiating in or out of bankruptcy court. Take their course with other creditors and unions. Now, I got onto this story last year, or at the beginning of the end of the last year, when they were talking about the plight of Detroit. Actually, let me rewind. I actually was aware of Detroit's plight some time ago. How? Because I am a chief proponent of Dr. Claude Anderson. Some of my viewers here might be aware of who Dr. Claude Anderson is. He is the author of Powernomics and the Powernomics movement, which is to get black folks back to economic equality with white people and to close the income gap between blacks and whites. The chief method of doing this is for us to, of course, own our own businesses. White people, the white population in the United States is at a 1 in 20 own their own business. Asians are 1 in 11. So they have although they are a much smaller population, they have a higher household income than white people. Black people, conversely, have a 1 in 250 business ownership. If we could get to the Asian level of 1 in 10, we wouldn't be having any of the debates that we have about race and black people in the United States. So, how does Dr. Claude Anderson come in? In his Powernomics, he went to the city of Detroit because the city of Detroit at the time was somewhere around 65 to 75% black. Now, if you have a movement started talking about empowering black people and ensuring that black people open up their own businesses, you want to go to an area where the population is very dense with the particular race, be it Jewish, Italian, what have you, that you're trying to affect. Detroit was a prime candidate for this. It had a fantastically large black population and it's very concentrated. But when he went to the city council and started proposing measures to encourage a black business ownership, black set-asides, and when he questioned the city council about what sort of set-asides does the city have for black people who are in the majority, they said they had a 10% set-aside for minorities, which means white women, Indians, who owned, 7-Elevens and what have you, convenience stores, Asians who own liquor stores and other convenience stores. Those are all counted in the minority set aside. The black people there, although they paid all the taxes, since they were 75% of the population, they paid all the taxes to the city. They got absolutely nothing for it. Once again, even with a black city council, it was and is ridiculous. How can you be in power and have absolutely no power? That's the whole point of Powernomics. So, what's the problem with Detroit? It is hampered by two things: population flight and Democratic stranglehold of the city. The Democrats have been in control of that city for decades. All of the legislation, rules, and regulations, and what have you, are from the Democratic Party and the Democratic think. The population flight, Detroit used to be in the top 10 cities population-wise in the United States. It is now 18th. With a 600,000 population, it was nearly 2 million back in the 50s, which was very sizable during those days. Population fled to the suburbs, including well-to-do blacks and middle-class blacks fled to the suburbs, and the entire tax burden never changed. So they never adjusted the city tax structure. They never adjusted the city services. They never adjusted anything to a population size of 600,000 people. They kept it at a 2, 3, 4, 5 million size population services wise. So every month the city was bleeding, hemorrhaging. Now everybody wants to get on a racial tip about it. The only racial tip that I will say is that the Black City Council did absolutely nothing for its citizens. But that is not saying anything, because white city councils do the same thing in every city. Have you taken a look at New York? Hello. Anyway, thank you. That's it for my show for the Detroit. If you live in Detroit, I would love to hear from you. I was thinking about in one of my businesses going to Detroit because of in my research, and I found that Detroit had such a sizable black population, and that would be a perfect laboratory for starting any of this black-centered or pan-Africanist business movements. It's an excellent opportunity, but you have to get rid of the Democrats. You have to get rid of the Democrats. They are bad policy-wise for business. They are bad policy-wise for black people. Thank you for tuning in.